Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We are now going to continue with a debate on the amended motion. So I invite anybody who would like to come forward, either side, to make comments. Could I ask you to keep your comments as concise as possible, please? And we are continuing with the 3-minute rule. Thank you very much.
Gaynor Parfitt, lay elected member, Monmouth Diocese.
Could you speak to the floor, please?
Gaynor Parfitt, lay elected member, Monmouth Diocese. I am definitely against an evaluation at this time. I'm for an ongoing review of all our work in general, but I feel that our particular ministry area is in such an embryonic stage. It's only been in existence since last January, 8 months, and it needs a certain amount of time to bed in. We're still in the throes of infancy, and there may be other areas like this. The Harris report had an immense impact, and we are still feeling the after effects of this. If there is to be an evaluation done, then the criteria should be closely looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Nessa.
Jonathan Sadler, co-opted member. The original motion seemed to be into whether or not to have this independent review into ministry areas or mission areas. This amended motion seems to be nothing. It seems to be saying we had plans that we were going to do and we're going to do them. Why are we voting for nothing? I can't vote for nothing. I won't vote against nothing. The only thing I can think to do is abstain, because to me it seems like this is nothing. Thank you.
Sorry, Nessa.
Diolch, Louis. Lanshaw, elected clergy, Swansea and Brecon. I'd ask you to vote against the amended motion. Deepest respect to James, who I respect greatly. But I'm actually surprised that the amendment was allowed, because it changes the fundamental nature of the motion, the original motion. And I'm surprised no one brought that up, really. I mean, I was going to bring it up, but here I am now. But the learning, everything, like Jonathan said, everything that's going to happen is going to happen anyway. So really it just took the guts out the original private member's motion. And, you know, if we were against independent review, then we should have just defeated the original bill. But, you know, we don't need the amended motion to mark our own homework anyway. So, thank you.
Diolch. Okay, stop.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Archbishop. I've been asked to say a bit more about the learning community, and I really take issue with the idea that this is voting for nothing. There has never been a time in the Church in Wales when we have structured the opportunity for us to listen to one another, to learn from one another, and to garner good practice and pass it back to the diocese. That's a new thing for us, and it's part, I think, of a wider development within the life of the Church, which is entirely healthy. One of the words that was used earlier was undefended. Beloved, we have been defended for years, operating independently, sometimes in deep competition and at times in hostility. That's the reality when you press the rewind button far enough. So when we establish an opportunity in which some of the critical areas of church life, our cathedrals, and some of the exciting things that our cathedrals and our larger churches are doing, what is the learning that they can share with us, which we can reflect on and pass back to our diocese, which may have, I think, a grounding and a relevance to other, perhaps more urban contexts, is really valuable. What are we learning about our urban contexts and the way in which mission and ministry is taking place in some of our larger conurbations? when I hear, for example, that a new housing development, which is bigger than the city of Bangor, is being built. One of the questions I have is, what does mission and ministry look like in that kind of context? Now, we don't have an opportunity for us to understand the dynamics and the way in which ministry is taking place there. Rural contexts, where the kind of deprivation that you see in our rural context is very different from the way in which it manifests itself in our urban contexts. What is really good rural ministry like? And of course, we're now, as I said yesterday, I think, we're only just down a few years into our journeying into the exploration of what different kinds of church plant, not just the ones that wonderfully we've seen in St. Asaph and Llandaff. That's not the only church plant model available to us. How are we going to disseminate that, scrutinize it, learn from it, embed and grow? So the idea that the diocesan learning community is a nothing is a fiction. Don't believe it. This is a really exciting thing for the church, and we ought to support the now amended motion wholeheartedly as an example of a church that is purposeful and inspired. Please do support this motion. It's really important.
Mark Thomas, elected Swansea and Brecon. This is my second time on GB so far, and I've been delighted how friendly the people are here. I loved yesterday's conversations. It surpassed my expectations of the kind of collegiality that we would have on governing body, and I loved what we were learning and sharing together. I therefore felt sad that 6 to 7 of us who were last in line to contribute before lunch were not allowed to, simply for the sake of expediency. That jarred for me with the commitment to mutual respect and mutual listening that seems to be a core value for governing body. I also believe that a mistake was made in voting on the amendment in the order which it was voted on, which appears to me not to be an amendment but an alternative pathway, rendering the meaning of the remaining motion completely unclear. Here is a principle that I believe is essential to the true flourishing of all of our churches, which I believe is what we are all committed to. Here's the principle. We need the best structure for every church in every church's unique context. The best structure for every church in every church's unique context. We all know and share the deep, deep concern that many of our churches throughout Wales are in imminent danger of extinction. People talk about extinction risk levels, and according to common categorizations, some of our churches are vulnerable. Some of our churches are endangered. Many of our churches are critically endangered. With the average age of many regular congregations, including the ones that I've worked with most recently, the average age being over 70 and UK life expectancy being 81, many of our churches have a maximum of 10 years to reverse years of decline and return to spiritual vitality and financial viability. Now, in a large gathering like this, we easily forget that these are critical times, these are urgent times, when every church needs every support and the best leadership it can get, and the legal structures with them that are most conducive for us to all succeed in mission and in many cases to survive. I am deeply concerned that the current one legal shape fits all that has been adopted for ministry areas so far is far too simple for the complexity and diversity of the contexts in which our churches witness and do mission. And that while certainly the current structures help some churches to consolidate resources and to support each other better and to start to grow again, that for some, perhaps many, it's actively hindering and slowing church growth that is urgent for survival. The proposed review, I believe, would have helped us to have the far more nuanced conversation about developing context-specific structures that are fit for purposes in all the different contexts in which we witness.
Can I notify you that you have your 3 minutes is
okay.
moving.
May I have 30 more seconds?
Right.
And help us to identify, the proposed review would have helped us to identify what is best for every church. I believe we need to give ourselves the opportunity to identify what is the best structure for every church in every context. I believe the recent amendment, which was not an amendment, it was an alternative pathway that renders the motion meaningless, has actually stopped us from opening ourselves to the more honest and helpful conversation that I believe will help all of our churches in every context to thrive.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Colleen, lay evangelist, St David's Diocese. I just wanted to address something that I think it was you, Bishop Mary, said in your reflection here, and that was on trust, and that we should trust the leaders of our church. And it also came up in the group yesterday, a lot of around trust, and obviously it's one of the Archbishop's principles. And I think I agree with that, but I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that actually that's a really sore topic. And we've had a really crazy couple of years as a church, all of us, and that's not necessarily anybody's fault at all. But I think that trust is, it might be difficult for a lot of people in the church right now. And so I think to just demand trust is a very sensitive topic. And so I think that that's potentially something that needs to be acknowledged a bit more and addressed, that there might be a trust issue with some of us here. And then as well, I think with this amendment, there needs to be a bit more clarity on if there was a review from within the church, who would be doing that? I think nobody has spoken about that, and before I voted for anything, I would want to know, well, who is going to be carrying out that review? Again, maybe that's on the issue of trust, I don't know, but that's my thoughts.
Okay, diolch. Nessa?
Ian Black, nominated Dean. I have a lot of sympathy with all who want to have critical reflection and the best reflection we can have. And reflection on everything we do is always a good thing. I don't think we should underestimate just what the COVID pandemic has done to our churches and has done to the whole of our life. And we are in a period of massive social change, and we're only seeing the beginnings of it. When I reflect on my own place, Newport Cathedral, I don't think we've got any sensible statistics now that we can relate to. I think December 2022 is when people really started coming back or beginning to appear. In December 2022, we had congregations that were totally off a different scale to what we'd seen in the preceding few years. And so I think the first baseline statistics that we're going to have to do any sensible comparison with is going to be the current year, and we obviously haven't got those yet. So I have sympathy with reviews and wanting to do them and think about what we're doing and go back to basics and think, what is the structure that's fit for purpose? But we're in such a massive place of flux that I think what we've got in the amended motion provides us with that learning community, and however that is expanded, and the critical reflection that we need. I think 2023 is going to be our baseline statistics. I think everything before that is just, actually, we just can't do anything with it. It doesn't help us at all. Thank you. So I would vote for this motion.
Ruth Coombs, cleric, co-opted. I think monitoring, evaluation and review is needed in organisations at all levels of maturity. And we can't do nothing. I think we've been in a state of inertia for some time. A lot of that triggered more recently by the pandemic that we've talked about. But some of that was there before. And what the pandemic has done is unearth inequalities and differences that have been long-standing and persistent and pervasive. There's place for self-reflection and accountability, but there's also a place for external scrutiny. And I don't think that this motion as amended is showing that those two things are mutually exclusive. There is a place for both. And I would suggest that we would benefit from a mixed economy and use a mixture of internal reflection, bringing together learning from those ministry areas that are further down the line that are flourishing, and some of them that we're in that are struggling. Have those honest conversations, start to build that trust, but also to weave in that some external scrutiny from places from other parts of the world from which we can learn, not just from over the border. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would want to make a contribution? In which case, I will ask Dr. Jonathan Wright if he would like to make a reply on the points made.
Jonathan Wright, a cleric elected at Swansea and Brecon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring this private member's motion forward on something that is a significant element in the life of the church. It's important that we as governing body members take responsibility as members of governing body for the life of our church and undertake things like private members' motions. Governing body has, yesterday in the debate, we did say that it was important that we listen to each other. And it's notable that at the first opportunity, the debate in a bill was killed by lunch. The Venerable Andy Grimwood once said, if all bishops disagree with you on something, then you're probably on the right track. I thought I had something going there. But at least we've had part of that discussion today. And it's useful that some of those points have been heard. And I hope that in the, as standing committee will meet again soon, that it will take the opportunity to reflect on some of those points and also move forward as it sees fit. Learning communities are now the centre of the edifice of what remains of the bill I proposed. Please follow up with your diocesan conferences to find out who's on them, what they've been up to. It'll be interesting to read in the standing committee minutes how they've been formed so far, and also what is reported back to them. I hope that we as governing body will see, perhaps as part of the standing committee report to governing body, a detailed part of what's been learnt, so that we too can learn from them. I'm very grateful for your time and attention in this debate and for everyone who's contributed, both for and against it. Thank you very much.
Right, we are now moving to vote on the amended motion. Alla rhai sy'n mynd I ddangos o blaid. Those in favour, could you please show your cards? And this will be a decision by simple majority of the governing body. And I think we're going to need...
We see against. I think that's probably enough. So I think we just see against.
Right, and I was... Okay. Please lower your hands. Could we have those in erbyn, those against?
It's very clearly balanced.
Right, and those, thank you, abstentions. And that seems a clear majority, so the motion is passed. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch very am eich ymynedd. Right. Yn Gymraeg, in Welsh. Dwi'n mynd I symud nawr I eitem 19, perthnasoedd ecumenaidd. Bydden nhw'n gwylio fideo o tua 10 munud o hyd a bu cyfle I chi ofyn cwestiynau. Dwi'n mynd I ofyn I Esgob Llanelwy I roi'r cynnig ac wedyn bydd y parchedig Dr Sarah Rowland-Jones yn eilio.
Gregory Cameron, Bishop of Slane Castle, ex officio. Well, governing body, I'm now going to ask you to change the focus of your thoughts and attentions completely, to abandon the confines of Wales and to think about the relationship of Wales to the world and to the wider Christian oikumene, the wider Christian fellowship across the globe. In a moment, we're going to watch a video which has been put together, thanks in good measure to the communications officer in St. Asaph, Karen Maurice, and which will seek to inform you about international ecumenism and the role of the Church in Wales in that. But before we watch the video, just two comments. First of all, this video doesn't attempt to engage us on all aspects of ecumenism. It doesn't talk about bilateral ecumenism, and it doesn't talk about ecumenism in Wales. Its focus is on global and international ecumenism and the part that the Church in Wales plays in multilateral relations. You may ask, why are we doing that now? And it's timely because last year saw the 11th Assembly of the World Council of Churches, and this year saw the assembly of the Conference of European Churches, in both of which members of the Church in Wales acted as delegates. And so sit back, it's the post-lunch slot, so don't go to sleep during the video. And after you've watched the video, I then have a motion which I'd like to move with governing body. Thank you very much.
We're just a small part of a very big picture, but we're working towards the same goal with every single one of these countries.
No matter how limited our resources are, really, I think we need to keep engaging with those around us.
Going somewhere where you meet people from all sorts of backgrounds with all sorts of things to say, I think that kind of knowledge and that networking is invaluable.
The Church in Wales has a strong history of positive engagement with the ecumenical quest. We know that Jesus wanted his church to be one community of disciples, but history has turned out rather differently. In the 20th century, the ecumenical movement was born afresh, an attempt to bring the churches together, perhaps even to recreate a united body of disciples. This video is intended to introduce to you the multilateral work of ecumenism at the international level, those global bodies with which the Church in Wales engages in the ecumenical quest. Canon Ainsley Griffiths is the Church in Wales's Director of Faith, Order and Unity.
Daw Cyngor Eglwysu'r Byd a rhyw 300 o eglwysi at ei gilydd mewn cymdeithas Gristnogol a chenhadaeth fywiog. Cristnogion o bob cwr o'r byd ac o ystod eang o draddodiadau. Digwyddiad mwyaf cyngor ydy'r gymanfa gyffredinol a genhelir bob ryw 8 mlynedd. Dyma gyfle i'r staff a'r eglwysi fel ei gilydd bod yn atebol i'w gilydd am ei bywyd yn Christ a'r daith tuag at undod Cristnogol. At last year's General Assembly of the World Council of Churches, which was held in Germany, Bishop Gregory and I were accompanied by Mandy Baton.
My first impression was wow. It felt as if the kaleidoscope of humanity was represented at the WCC. As delegates, we may have spoken different languages, were from different cultures, and had different approaches to worship. But the common bond of being followers of Jesus and wanting to be carriers of his life and love to the world broke through any barrier. We were one church. I also witnessed on a level which I hadn't before the power of the collective voice. There were 500 million Christians represented at the General Assembly. That's a big voice, and a voice which has permission to speak to presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens, because it's a voice which can't be ignored. It was powerfully highlighted that if we as Christians can focus on what unites us rather than what divides us, then we together have the power to challenge cruelty and injustice. We have the influence to enforce the rights of human dignity. And together we can work towards reducing the devastating impact of the socio-economic and climate crisis which all nations are facing. It was a life-transforming experience for me.
Mandy, we live in financially difficult times. So in your opinion, is being part of a costly organisation such as the WCC a good thing for the Church in Wales?
It's a very good thing. Not only can our voice be amplified in the global sphere, but we can contribute to amplifying the voices of so many who aren't heard. We might be a small nation in comparison to others, but the richness of our Welsh heritage, our history of spirituality and revival has hugely impacted the world. And therefore, it's so very important we have a place at the global table. If we as the Church want the world to be changed by the salvation and life-transforming power of Jesus Christ, because I believe it is only then we truly see the justice and reparation that we seek, I can't stress strongly enough how important it is that the Church in Wales partners with others across the globe who desire the same.
Teitl y gymanfa oedd Mae Cariad Crist yn cymell y byd I gymod ac I undod. Roddir sylw penodol ar hyn yn rhaglenni cyfrifoldeb cymdeithasol y cyngor, enghraifft trwy bwysleisio cymodi rhwng pobloedd, yn Rwsia ac Wcrain, a hefyd ymhlith pobloedd y tiroedd sanctaidd. Cefnogir ymdrechion eglwysi ddod i'r afel am materion yn ymwneud â mudo dynol ac yn benodol I gefnogi ffoaduried. Ceir sylw hefyd ar gymod ac undod rhwng dynion a menywod, a gweithredu atal trais yn erbyn menywod. Ac wrth gwrs mae cymodi a'n byd naturiol bregus yn holl bwysig, gyda chefnogaeth arbennig eglwysi mewn gwledydd sydd eisoes yn gweld effeithiau enbyd newydd hinsawdd. On a European level, the Church in Wales is active in the Conference of European Churches, or CEC for short. Its own General Assembly was held earlier this year in the Estonian capital Tallinn, and we were represented by Sarah Rogers, as well as Caris Britton and Henry Grover, ordinands from the Diocese of Llandaff, who served as stewards.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good experience. It's been a really good atmosphere here. I think it's been a really valuable experience. I think a lot of the business, some of the business stuff could actually be done by other means, but I think we would miss out if we didn't get together. I think the dinner table conversations, the coffee discussions, picking up on the smaller issues that are affecting churches that we perhaps would miss if we weren't part of this wider discussion. Being able to engage in worship together has been really important, and you wouldn't get that if we did a meeting online. You don't get those shared experiences. You're just boxes on a screen and you don't get to know people, and I think that's really important. I think one of the key questions is how my experience then gets taken on by the Church in Wales. How do I report back? How does it have an impact? How do I enthuse people about ecumenism in Wales? Because for the most part, people aren't, in my experience, all that interested.
This is my first ecumenical event, and I think it's hearing everybody's story. I was partnered up with a German guy on my first day here, and we had to get to know each other, and it turns out his parents were born in Wrexham. So the Lord does bring you together in those ways. It does help me see how Wales is just part of a bigger picture. There are so many people around this conference that I'm also interested to learn about Wales, because they just think of the Church of England when they hear Anglican, but to talk about the Church in Wales and to share our story as well has been really encouraging.
This has been incredible, and I think what you can learn and gain from this is, in all honesty, not something we can learn and gain from just staying in Wales. Like, Wales is becoming more diverse. I mean, even the fact of use of language here is huge, and obviously, Wales wants to become more bilingual and for more people to speak Welsh and for that to be a bigger part of the church. And you see loads of that here with them using different translations, the worship being in multi-languages. So I think, yeah, the knowledge that you get here is invaluable.
Yn ogystal â CEC, mae'r Eglwys yng Nghymru yn aelod o Gymuned Porfo. Cymundeb yw hwn sy'n dod ag Anglicaniaid o'r ynysoedd hyn, o Portugal a Sbaen, ynghyd â Lutheriaid o Sgandinafia a'r Baltig. Ers chwarter canrif, rydym wedi cydnabod dilusrwydd, urdde, gweinidogaeth ordiniedig yr holl eglwysi hyn, yn ogystal â medru rannu'n llawn yn gael a sacrament. Mae'n gymundeb byw, gyda rai esgobaethau'n penderfynu gyfeillio, enghraifft esgobaeth Llandaf ac esgobaeth Uppsala yn Sweden. As we think, pray and act as Anglicans on this global stage, we are dependent on the excellent work of the splendidly named Inter-Anglican Standing Commission on Unity, Faith and Order, or IWASCFO for short. Sarah Rowland-Jones, the Dean of St David's, is a member.
One of the roles of the Inter-Anglican Standing Commission for Unity, Faith and Order is to support and encourage ever-deepening relationships between the churches of the Anglican Communion and our ecumenical partners, whether at a global level or locally in various regions of the world. One of the things that we're trying to do is to ensure consistency and coherence in the way that we all talk to one another, so that we don't use different language to say the same things, or the same language to talk about different things. We look from two perspectives, top down and bottom up. Top down is the faith and order work, questions of theology and doctrine, of how we order our churches, especially in relation to ordained ministry and liturgy, particularly the Eucharist. Bottom up, we're looking at how we can expand areas for practical cooperation on the ground, to worship together as much as we can, in mission and ministry, and in social justice and all sorts of other areas for coming closer together, whether it's two or more partners working alongside one another. We also support schemes for unity between churches in various parts of the world. All of this really matters. Jesus prayed on the night before he died at the Last Supper that his followers would be one so that the world might believe. Frankly, our division is a scandal to the gospel. We need to strive as far as we can to live together as one, as brothers and sisters in Christ, to overcome the divisions of history, to show that we really are one church, one faith, one Lord. All that we can do to build up and strengthen that common life together will help us in the proclamation of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, which is needed so much, his redeeming love for his hurting world.
This presentation is a really brief overview of how we're playing our part to build a community of churches at international level. The Church in Wales is actually recognised by many of our partners as a big player on the international scene. As someone once said, we're a small church that punches above our weight when it comes to international participation. I hope that the participants in this video have given you a taste of the very real contribution that they and we as a church are making at the global level. And I hope as well that we're persuading you that this is something to support. The work of the church in finding its own unity and then bearing witness to God's love in Jesus Christ is an important part of our mission. And I hope that we've given you some sense of the importance of that work and of the participation that we're offering. We'd like your support, and we hope that we have your prayers as we seek to follow Jesus' will that the church may be one.
The work of multilateral ecumenical relations at global level is a huge piece of work, and it would be very easy to have produced a video 3 or 4 times that length to share with governing body about the very real work that WCC and KEC are achieving to achieve the goals of justice and peace and the proclamation of the gospel at global level. But we thought that we would limit it and allow you to have your say. I've suddenly realised I've left a piece of paper behind. And that is the wording of the motion I'd like to put to you. There are 3 things I'd like to ask of governing body. First of all, I'd like you to welcome the engagement that the Church in Wales has at international level with the various international ecumenical instruments, as outlined by Ainsley and our colleagues in that video. Secondly, I hope that governing body is able to thank all those who do that work. It demands quite a lot of people. Caris Britton, who you saw in that video, was a steward in the KEC assembly and in Latvia, and as she finished that, she was called to go to the Central Committee of the WCC in Geneva. Now, it sounds as if we've given her a lovely holiday, doesn't it? To go to Latvia and to Switzerland. It was jolly hard work, and she was put through her paces throughout those times with a change of ecumenical scenes. And Caris's contribution is reflected by the work of many others as well. So I hope that you can welcome the work, that you can thank those who participate, and that thirdly, you can affirm our commitment as a Church in Wales to work for the unity of the Church of Christ across the globe, so that the voice of Jesus Christ may be heard through the witness of a united and uniting Church. And I beg to move this motion.
Can I call on the Very Reverend Dr. Sarah Rowland-Jones to second the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Your Grace, as you'll see, I've had a haircut since then. Some are born ecumeniacs, some achieve ecumenia, and some have ecumenia thrust upon them. And whereas I come from a very diverse background, Anglicans, Baptists, Calvinistic, Methodists, Daniel Rowland, and Bunwer, I achieved ecumenism, I think, in Wrexham, where I was part, before morning prayer for the clergy team in St Giles Church, some of us, including Brian Matthews, who was here with our ecumenical visitors yesterday, used to meet Monday to Friday for half an hour of prayer together beforehand. And I was thrust more deeply into ecumenia by the bench in 1999, when 3 weeks after ordination as deacon, I received a fax from the Anglican Communion Office inviting me to put my 15 years of prior experience as a British diplomat in cross-cultural communication at the disposal of the Anglican Communion's international ecumenical work. And so, believe you me, if you think IASCUFO is a strange thing, there are mnemonics and acronyms all over the place, beyond capacity to believe. But I've been involved in work with all Catholics, with global multilateral bodies, with Pentecostals and the Orthodox. And I steer the ecumenical work of the Inter-Anglican Standing Commission for Unity, Faith and Order, and have done for the last decade with various publications. You heard me up there talk about why ecumenism is not a minority sport. It is for the sake of the gospel. Jesus prayed that we should one, so that the world may believe. I'm also energized in this work by 1 Corinthians 12, that no member of the body of Christ can say, I don't belong to some other member. Even if sometimes on the surface it seems that we're so different that we might be mutually incomprehensible. But to go back to 1 Corinthians 12, the eye cannot understand hearing, nor can the ear understand what it is to see. And so it is that by the grace of God within the body of Christ, we are far more together than just the sum of our separate parts. We need others and they need us. And so I thought I just want to reflect on two particular sides of that coin. Why is it that others need us? Or perhaps, how is it that others tell us that they really appreciate the engagement of the church in Wales? And it's true, they do. We can speak of the riches and indeed the challenges of a long Christian heritage in these islands, together with the Irish and the Scots, with a freedom that the Church of England often cannot, burdened with so many legacies of the past, not to say nothing of establishment, its wealth, a disproportionate role. One of the things I keep wanting to say to the church in Wales, because I've worked in other parts of the world as well, is that most of the Anglican Communion's churches around the world are pretty much like us, fairly modest, multilingual, and actually we have far more in common with one another than we do with what's on the other side of Offa's Dyke. We should not compare ourselves so much with them, but together we are seen to be much more representative of global ecumenism. We contribute quality people to this work. There are others, of course, like Dr. Heather Payne, the ones you saw in the video too. Something that's often quoted back at me wherever I go is Rowan Williams said, only the whole church can aspire to know the whole truth. And I think we are good friends on the global stage. We heard yesterday about the importance of standing in solidarity with Christians in Pakistan. Earlier in this year, the Archbishop was in the Diocese of Jerusalem and meeting many ecumenical partners. Indeed, I was also there earlier in the year and met the Patriarch of Jerusalem. But it matters when people like that, under pressure, have international visitors. There's a story about Desmond Tutu I was going to tell you, but I won't because it takes up too much time. And of course, many of you will know from your own churches or dioceses strong links with Christians of other traditions in different parts of the world. And we need them too. There is such encouragement in sharing stories of living faith. And of course, many places in the world have a lot of growth going on. And we who are not always in that place can be lifted up by them. Speaking with people from different cultures and traditions helps us to live more wisely in our own culture. The incarnation of God in Jesus Christ, flesh and blood, illustrates ultimately the truth that God's good news, the gospel, is always expressed in the particularities of time and place. And yet it's hard for us to stand outside ourselves, so to speak, and have that critical eye on our own situation. Our ecumenical partners particularly hold up a mirror for us to see ourselves more clearly. Where is our way of being Anglican appropriately enculturated? Where there are dangers of inappropriate syncretism? How much are we still caught up in the legacy of a Victorian morality? Or indeed influenced by values of Western liberal democracy, which may not be wholly wrong, but are we truly clear on what we are doing and making sure that it is Christ-shaped, a very different engine and dynamic and touchstone and vocation? And when we have that clarity, we are enabled to speak more distinctively with the voice of Christ in our own time and place. They have such riches from which we can learn. Their experience, others dealing with growing secularization, Christians being a minority, multi-faith context, the legacies of slavery and colonialism, the environment, and so much more. Also, I wonder if you remember, do you know that way back in the 1970s and 80s, Anglicans with Methodists, Presbyterians, United Reformed Church and certain Baptists within Wales covenanted together for unity to form not a church in Wales, but the Church of Wales. We still haven't managed to complete that journey. Others have done so. We should listen to them. It wasn't always easy, but the way that they got themselves over the hurdle may help us. Back in around the year 2000, Tertullian wrote on the great expansion of Christianity then, "The heathen say," he said, "see how these Christians love one another." And my life and faith have been hugely enriched by the friendships, the deep love I have come to share with Christians from many other traditions across the world. So I want you to support this motion, and I've said a little more because I think it is easy to say the words, but really I'd like you to become infected with at least a little bit of ecumenia as well, because I think that it not only enriches us, but actually it is about obedience to the call of Jesus Christ and the empowering of our own capacity to preach the gospel of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. So I second this motion.
Diolch yn fawr. Would anybody like to come forward and make comment on what we have seen on the video and what we have heard in the proposal and seconding? Thank you very much.
Rosie Diamond, cleric, Diocese of Bangor. I'd like to speak in Welsh. Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn i'r esgob, i'r holl tîm sydd wedi paratoi cyflwyniad mor wych. Dwi am rhannu ychydig o ecumenia fy hun. Eleni oedd fy mraint i gynrychioli'r Eglwys yng Nghymru yn y Kirchentag, cynhadledd yr Eglwys Lutheraidd yn yr Almaen, ac oedd yn brofiad arbennig o dda, ac i fi yn dangos bod yr Arglwydd yn gweithio mewn ffordd newydd i ddod â ni efo'n gilydd fel holl eglwys y byd. Kirchentag yw cynhadledd wedi cael ei sefydlu yn syth ar ôl yr ail rhyfel byd, yn dilyn yn ôl troed Bonhoeffer, ac isio dal ati i drafod pethau gwleidyddol o bersbectif crefydd ac ein ffydd Cristnogol. Wel, jyst cwpl o enghreifftiau pam oedd yr amser mor ysbrydoledig i fi. Y diwrnod cyntaf nes i rando ar y Minister President Frank-Walter Steinmeier yn rhoi pregeth gwych ar y priodas yn Cana yn Galilee, yn cyfeirio yn benodol ar yr argyfwng hinsawdd ac yn rhannu geiriau o obaith efo ni. Yr ail diwrnod nes i gymryd rhan mewn pererindod gwych o amgylch hen ddinas Nuremberg. Naeth y bardd Ars Thomas wrth gwrs yn deud, "People are becoming pilgrims again." Ac yn yr Almaen, roedd wedi darganfod bod yr un peth yn digwydd fama, da ni'n gweithio llawer ar hwg pererindod ar hyn o bryd yn esgobaeth Bangor, ac oedd yn brofiad arbennig unwaith eto. Y trydydd diwrnod, a dyma peth olaf i fi a ddeud, ond oedd jyst profiad mor dda. Es i eglwys enfawr, llawn bobl, yn gwrando ar parchedig Susan Dirber, sy'n President Ewropeaidd Cyngor Eglwys i'r Byd ar hyn o bryd yn siarad am ecumeniaeth y galon. Felly, fi am cefnogi'r cynnig, fi yn diolchgar dros ben am fy mhrofiad fy hun, really, o newid perspektif. Weithiau, da ni yn poeni am lot o bethau yn yr Eglwys yng Nghymru ar hyn o bryd, ac oedd i fi yn bersonol, oedd newid perspektif pwysig iawn. Oedd 100,000 o bobl o 4 ban byd yn bresennol, a dwi'n gobeithio mynd yn ôl i'r Kirchentag nesaf yn Hanover yn 2025, a gobeithio bydd eraill o'r Eglwys yng Nghymru sy'n dod efo fi. Diolch o galon.
Diolch.
Sadler, co-opted lay member. We've heard a fantastic, really important message about the church, Christ's bride, being one, and about unity between Christians across church lines. But I find that a bit hard hearing that here, knowing that less than 6 months ago, the bishop sent a message out to clergy saying this: Church in Wales clergy should stand back from receiving communion at services held under the auspices of the Anglican Convocation in Europe. No ministers affiliated with the Anglican Convocation in Europe should exercise ministry or leadership in a Church in Wales context. It doesn't fit the message we've just heard.
Yes, sir, please.
Hannah Wilkinson, St David's Diocese, lay member. What I'd like to say is that the average Anglican these days is apparently 26 years old, female, and living in Africa. And about 70% of the Anglican communion belong to African Gafcon churches, which are growing. Now, we seem to have alienated ourselves a bit from those churches by the decisions that we've made. And so, whilst I thoroughly support this motion, I think a certain amount of reconciliation somewhere along the lines is going to have to be necessary. Thank you.
Diolch.
First, I apologise for speaking again. I'm really not trying to prolong it. But that motion is very close to my heart. Monis Farah, elected cleric from St David's Diocese. I had the privilege to accompany the Archbishop to the Diocese and Province of Jerusalem in May. And over that time, we met the Greek Orthodox Archbishop of Bethlehem. We met the Latin, which is Roman Catholic Bishop of Galilee. We met the Anglican Archbishop. We met also the Christian High Commission for the Palestinian Authority. And all that we heard was this: speak for us. All that we heard, speak for us. And a lot of the Christians around the world, our ecumenical brothers and sisters, are going through some really, really rough time. Yesterday we were reminded of the church in Pakistan, and often there is nobody to speak for them. They are actually, will become immediately vulnerable if they raise up their voice. We can. And my lasting statement from the Malachite bishop, which is Greek Catholic, so they'll have Orthodox liturgy with Catholic theology, and they've been one of the unit churches from the 9th century. So it's a really steep church in tradition and in history. The bishop actually said to us this: please, please don't forget this visit and speak of what we're suffering, what we're going through. There is a hemorrhaging of the Christians in many of these places. And I'm not speaking about Western Europe, I'm speaking about in Africa. There is a lot of migration. In the Middle East, the migration has reached a crescendo. We once, believe it or not, the Christians in Palestine, which is now Palestine, Israel, having the whole country, was between 20 to 30%. Today we're about 2%. And that is diminishing the church. Praise God, we still got strong institutions. The Anglican Church, our sister province, got 30 institutions, including schools and hospitals, and serving every community. I had the pleasure and the honor of being a trustee for a mission established in Scotland in 1861 that is working in Nazareth as a medical mission. And to see that hospital serving Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Arab Christians, Druze, Bedouin, you name it, and employing the biggest employer in town. 60% of those employees belong to the Christian churches. If we lose these institutions, yet there will be more migration. And with every wage earner, we lose families. We don't just lose one. And as a result of that, the Christian presence is diminishing in many countries. And we have still, till now, that might change, we still have the freedom to actually support our brothers and sisters around the world. And I think we need to be absolutely supportive of this motion, but to go beyond just accepting a motion. We often accept motions, but I think it needs to go to actively engage with establishing in every local community an ecumenical relationship around the world, even locally too. Are we really well integrated into Katyn? Are we integrated into the evangelical independent churches? So thank you very much. I'm in full support with that, but I would want to encourage us to go a step further, support it fully, and then do something about it.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Stuart Dean, co-opted St Asaph Diocese. Gosh, they do say the first time you stand up here, it's nerve-wracking, and it really is. I just felt moved just to come up here and just say that, you know, I love to travel and I love to share the Gospels and I love to tell people what we're doing here in the Church in Wales. And I love to share this work wherever I go, whatever opportunity. I'm always encouraged by just how well this is received and the interest that people have in what we're doing in the Church in Wales. Of course, we know the Church in Wales, but you know, the world outside doesn't necessarily understand what's going on within it. I think any opportunity to interact with fellow Christians and those that are yet to come to faith has to be a great thing. Jesus taught us that the only debt that we owe in this world is to one another. So how better to share this love than engaging proactively with the various and varied international stages and to enhance the commitment to the global movement. We need to be in it to win it. So I really do support this. Thank you.
Diolch.
Anna Corey, lay-elected Llandaff. We've heard a lot about big gatherings and big conferences, but the video did also mention the Diocese of Llandaff's links with the Lutheran Diocese of Uppsala, and I'd just like to share a little bit about my own experience of our parish, or our ministry area of the East Vale that is linked with the parish of Lagunda in that diocese. I've been fortunate enough to visit the parish and also to host visitors from that parish, and I just would commend how much at local and church levels we can learn from each other. We're linked with a parish who has quite similar problems and to us, but some differences. There are differences in circumstances, but we, I think, have all learnt enormously from sharing those experiences, from sharing what we've learnt. We've also developed a shared prayer diary. We've talked about the importance of prayer, and we pray for each other in our worship weekly on a regular basis. And I think those are just two examples of how we have learned from each other, and I would commend this, but at the local level as well as at the larger big gatherings. Thank you.
Mark Thomas, elected cleric, Swansea and Brecon. I really love this, fully supportive. Just picking up on what Mona suggested, am I allowed to suggest an additional clause?
You would need to move it in writing and give us copies in writing.
I've just got a
2
very simple
copies
one written
or
down
an
here.
email. If you'd like to introduce that as an amendment clause, it's in order.
Okay.
I'll get it on the slides.
Right, this will be on the slides before long, but the addition would be to explore ways, or will explore ways, to actively support and pray for the persecuted church worldwide.
So it's just to simply that, to add an additional clause to what's already a great motion. We'll explore ways to actively support and pray for the persecuted church worldwide. I just thought it might be helpful for us to have that that we affirm.
We now have to have a debate on the amendment if anybody wants it, and then a vote. I'll get it on the screen.
Right. They don't make this easy for me, do they? We now have to have a debate on the additional clause.
Chair, on a point of order, I suspect that the last thing governing body wants at the moment is to have a debate about an amendment and then about a motion. Time is passing on. I just checked with Matthew, and I think he agreed that I could simply accept the amendment, and that would allow governing body to continue with the substantive debate. There's only one thing I'd say, and that is I have an absolute dislike of split infinitives. and therefore, I would want to explore ways to support actively the persecuted church rather than as it was presented. But I hope we can move forward on that basis.
Right.
Technically, we have to open a debate, but I assume that was a plea for nobody to speak in that debate and immediately move. And with governing bodies' consent, we won't treat the Bishop of St Asaph's editorial amend as an amendment to an amendment, which isn't in order. Chair, if nobody wishes to speak, we would move straight to a vote on that
Are we
amendment.
to the right to reply?
But if there's no debate, there's no need to reply. If there is, so we're moving straight to a vote to adopt the amendment.
Oh, to adopt the amendment. Right. Okay. To adopt the amendment, which is, we'll explore ways to support actively and pray for the persecuted church worldwide. Can we please have a show of hands or blaid for? An erbyn against? And a matal abstention. Right, that was carried. The motion as amended.
Any more speakers?
Any more speakers? Bishop Gregory. Bishop Gregory has the right of reply.
I'd now like to address governing body for about 45 minutes. No, seriously, I'm very grateful for that debate, and I'm grateful for all the contributions. For Rosie talking about the experience of the Kirchentag, for Moniz talking about the very important job of the church to support Christians in the Holy Land. One of the things that has been very impressive to me is the work of the World Council of Churches and their programme of ecumenical accompaniment, by which they enable people to go and live alongside Palestinian Christians and experience what life is like in Israel. And again, is an example of the worthy work that WCC undertakes. I'm also grateful for what Stuart had to say and Anna had to tell us about the links with Uppsala. They all bear witness and testimony to the way in which our own discipleship and witness is enriched by engagement with the worldwide church. Mark opened up a new area, and to be honest, I'd love to hear the views of governing body about the way in which we support the persecuted church, because I think it's one area of mission and engagement which is vitally important that we undertake. I've recently finished working as chair of the Anglican Oriental Orthodox International Commission, which works with churches which are largely based in the Middle East and know the reality of persecution in their day-to-day life. It's vitally important that they know they have the support of churches like ourselves. I'm also conscious of the comments of Jonathan and Hannah, who speak about another area of pain and distress
in the life of the Church and in the life of the Anglican Communion at the moment. I personally am very disappointed that the Anglican Convocation in Europe felt it necessary to set up a presence here in Wales, but I'm also conscious that that is another huge area of concern and debate in which there will be different views here in governing body, and we probably can't explore those on this occasion. But be assured that we do want to work for healing and reconciliation. And if there is a way forward, I'm sure that we as the Church in Wales will work as hard as we can to find that way forward. I beg to move the motion.
Diolch yn fawr. Yn y Gymraeg, os gwelwch yn dda, in Welsh, please. Dwi'n moyn wneud y pleidlais olaf yn Gymraeg nawr. So ni'n mynd i symud i'r pleidlais ar y cynnig, ac bydd y canlyniad o mwyafrif syml. Y rhai sydd o blaid y cynnig, newch chi dangos. Diolch. Y rhai sydd yn erbyn, y rhai sydd yn ymatal. Diolch yn fawr. A dyma diwedd y sesiwn fi. Allai ddiolch i bawb am eich gefnogaeth a'ch ymyneddgar. Gyfynnes i fod yn sesiwn hawdd i'r un gyntaf, ond John nath e ddim fod yn sesiwn hawdd. So diolch yn fawr. Na fi nawr symud ac ofyn i Esgob Llanelwy i gymryd y gader, os gwelwch yn dda.
Well, good afternoon. I feel a little bit hesitant. Yesterday evening, I almost stopped you getting to your tea. Today, it seems I'm stopping you getting home at the end of governing body. But there are still some important items on the agenda, and so I'd like to invite now Mr. Tim Llewellyn, the chair of our standing committee, to present to us the standing committee report. At the end of this report, there will be two recommendations. Firstly, a recommendation about future meetings of governing body, and secondly, a recommendation about the general report. And people will be invited to respond and comment to those in due course, if they so wish. Tim.
Good afternoon. I will assume that you've all read the report, and so I won't go through it in detail. When I propose recommendation 2, which is the approval of the whole report, members will have a chance at that stage to comment or ask questions on any part of the report. When we are considering the first recommendation, I'd be grateful if you would just comment on that specific proposal. So before I put the recommendations, I'd like to just highlight two sections in the report. Paragraph 4 relating to the Residential Standing Committee meeting. You will see that our Standing Committee held an overnight meeting in May at which we focused on our strategic roles and responsibility, and this work continues, very much feeding into the Archbishop's priorities. Please note that the next triennium of the Standing Committee begins in 2024, and dioceses will soon be asked at your diocesan conference to elect one cleric and one layperson from each diocese to membership of the Standing Committee for the new triennium. If you'd like to know more about the membership of the Standing Committee and what it entails, please speak to me or to Simon Lloyd. I'd also like to draw your attention, please, to paragraphs 29 to 31, relating to the Monmouth Review Implementation Group. The Standing Committee has decided that a comprehensive update of the work of the Monmouth Review Implementation Group will be included in April 2024 governing body agenda. It is hoped by that point, very few areas of substantive work will remain and the group will have completed its implementation work. I move that we... No, what am I doing here? Please now move to putting the recommendations you proposed to Dr. Heather Payne will formally second.
Yes, I think if you wish to move recommendation 1 about the future meeting of governing body, and I invite the Vice Chair to second that motion. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak to the motion to accept that recommendation?
Should I actually say what the recommendation is about the...
Yes, that does. By all means. It's in the papers, but it might be a good idea for us to know.
Sorry, I know we're desperate to go, but sorry. So, first of all, I need to declare an interest as a member of the Council of the University of Wales Trinity St David as we're talking about the date and place of the September 2024 governing body meeting. Assessments of the potential GB venues have been carried out by staff to check that venues meet the requirements for holding a governing body meeting, including the availability of accommodation and meals, a sufficiently large meeting hall with appropriate technical and audiovisual facilities, and the cost. All venues reviewed have good points and drawbacks, which the Standing Committee has considered carefully. After careful consideration, the Standing Committee recommends that the venue for the September 2024 governing body meeting is the University of Wales Trinity St David Lampeter campus. The venue has been reserved for the dates of the meeting. The governing body has previously confirmed the meeting dates for its spring 2025 meeting, which is Wednesday and Thursday, the 30th of April and 1st of May 2025. The Standing Committee recommends that venue Cymru Llandudno be booked as the venue for this meeting. This will allow the general pattern adopted in recent years of holding the spring meeting in North Wales in alternative years to continue. So the dates for the September 2025 governing body meeting were agreed to be Wednesday and Thursday, the 11th and 12th of September. A recommendation on the location for that meeting will be made in due course. So I will now propose...
Thank you. Now that you know, does anyone wish to speak to that recommendation? There being no... Yes, please do come forward.
Ian Black, nominated Dean. It's a practical thing. As an EV driver, Lampeter is not in, as far as I know, the best charging zone of Wales. Now, 2025, or 24, whatever the date was, there is chance for EV chargers to be installed. But those of us who... It's a place you have to get to by car. And some thought as to what the implications are for EV drivers, which I think might include the bench of bishops, actually, who are all moving over to EVs. We could all be sitting with extension leads coming out of our windows. It's a practical consideration, please.
Come forward, please.
Sorry, just quickly in response to that, I was a student at Lampeter, and actually they have loads of electric vehicle charging points now. They have like lots and lots, so you'll be fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you.
Yes, Justin, please come to the... And would anyone else who wishes to speak please join the queues on either side?
Is there any indication about cost effectiveness on when it comes to choosing venues? Is it just we get the right venue and we pay the money, or how does that work?
Are there any other questions before I refer them back to Tim? Okay, Tim, would you like to address that point?
First of all, thank you very much for Celine for just confirming around the EV charging points in Lampeter. Thank you, really appreciate that. And then as far as the cost implications, yes, each venue is costed, and rather than going into the actual details, I can tell you that Lampeter is a very economic option to be chosen. Your words.
If there are no further comments, may we move to a vote? All those members of governing body in favour of recommendation 1, please show. Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to vote against the adoption of that recommendation? There are 2 objections, as far as I can see, both from St David's. A short journey you will have. And anyone wishing to register an abstention, and Tim has declared his conflict of interest and duly abstains. Thank you very much. We now move to a general consideration of anything that is in the Standing Committee report. Tim, would you like formally to move the reception of the report?
Yes, I formally propose that the Standing Committee report be moved.
Thank you very much. And the Vice Chair duly seconds. So if anyone would like to speak to any matter in the Standing Committee report, now is your opportunity. There being no indication of anyone wishing to speak or ask a question, I'll now move to a vote on recommendation 2 to receive the Standing Committee report. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Anyone who wishes to vote against, please show. There is no one voting against. Anyone wishing to register an abstention, please show. Thank you very much indeed. Those of you who have been following the agenda will know that we now move on to item 21 on the agenda, which is another report from the Standing Committee. But on this occasion, it's a report specifically on governance and legal matters. And because these can sometimes be important and complex, they're presented now separately. And again, I invite Tim to speak to those.
Thank you very much, Bishop. So during the course of my presentation of the report, I shall be proposing 4 separate motions. The first 3 of these motions are motions to make changes to the Constitution of the Church in Wales. The final motion is that the report itself be received. As with the report of the Standing Committee we have just taken at Agendum 20, the time for debate on the report as a whole, or questions not relating to the particular constitutional changes proposed, is during debate on the final motion. You will be expecting 5 motions rather than 4, and this deserves an explanation. In your papers is a minor proposed amendment to the constitutional provisions about clergy incapacity, labelled Recommendation 2. Following some detailed work over the summer months, the view of the RB Legal, HR and Finance teams is now that this section of the canons and the policy in the clergy handbook may in fact need some wider amendments than currently proposed and need a little more time to work on this. So with the Chair's permission, I'm withdrawing Recommendation 2, and the Standing Committee will come back with a set of proposals in April 2024 to resolve this issue. So I move to the individual recommendations. Each of these is set out together with an explanatory note in your papers at Appendix 1 to the report. I will also outline each proposed change so we are all clear as to which we are debating. All references to pages and appendices relate to the Standing Committee's report on governance and legal matters dated September 2023. If you were looking at it in the electronic Dropbox, it may be found in the folder entitled Session 7. So the first recommendation, gender-neutral language. The first recommendation is that the governing body authorises the Standing Committee to approve changes to the Constitution of the Church in Wales which solely change gendered language to gender-neutral language without the need for the governing body itself to approve each amendment. For several years, the governing body has been gradually approving changes to the Constitution, removing masculine gendered language on a piecemeal basis. Allowing the Standing Committee to undertake this would allow the project to be accelerated significantly. Any changes made by the Standing Committee will be reported to the governing body in the Standing Committee reports. Chair, I move Recommendation 1.
Thank you very much. And as Chair, I formally second that recommendation. And the floor is now open for debate. If anyone wishes to speak to that recommendation, please show yourselves now.
Good afternoon, Mark Simpson, elected cleric, Llandaff. Can I just clarify with gender-neutral language, is this referring to people or to God or both in the Constitution?
Are there any other questions or contributions? Tim, would you like to answer that question?
Very much refers to people.
If there are no other contributions, then we can proceed to a vote. And once again, all those in favour of recommendation 1, please show. Thank you very much. Anyone wishing to vote against, please show. And anyone wishing to register an abstention, please show. That's 1, 2. Thank you very much. I declare that recommendation adopted, and we move now to recommendation 3.
So as I mentioned just now, we won't be moving recommendation 2, and we will pick this topic up at governing body in April. So as Bishop Gregory says, I will move straight to recommendation 3. Recommendation 3 is a constitutional amendment relating to the annual meeting of the vestry and deanery conferences. Recommendation 3 is an amendment to the Constitution to change the deadlines by which the annual vestry meetings and annual deanery conference meetings must be held. Mission and ministry area treasurers across the province report that it is becoming increasingly more difficult to prepare consolidated accounts for all churches in a large ministry area and have them independently examined in time for a vestry meeting in March or April. The Secretariat consulted with archdeacons and bishops on this topic, and the view of the majority of respondents was that extending the deadline to the 30th of June struck the best balance between giving treasurers time to prepare the accounts and ensuring that church warden admissions and diocesan conferences were not unduly inconvenienced. The proposal is therefore that the deadline for vestry meetings be moved from 30th of April to 30th of June, and in turn, the deadline for the annual deanery conference meetings to be moved from the 30th of June to the 31st of July. Chair, I move recommendation 3.
Thank you very much. I formally second that from the Chair and invite anyone who wishes to speak to recommendation 3.
Thank you. Very quickly, Richard Wood, elected clerics, Bangor. Ooh, wrong diocese. No, Bangor. I am not going to get myself into trouble by declaring the date of our annual vestry meeting at all. Suffice to say that in addition to this, which I think is an important motion, I would very much like there to be a concerted effort to look at what other support there might be available to ministry areas to help them to achieve even this date. We have been entirely dependent on support from the Diocesan Office just to come even remotely close to this new date. For ministry areas who are handling significant sums of money, even this is going to present a challenge, and assistance is going to be needed across the board. Thank you.
Tim, do you wish to respond?
Thank you. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to speak to Richard in a bit more detail and find out exactly what sort of assistance they're after, and then we can explore that. So, and I'm speaking as a treasurer myself there, so.
Are there any other contributions or questions? There being no other contributions or questions, I'll put the matter to a vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against, please show. Anyone wishing to register an abstention, please show. 1 abstention. Thank you very much. That recommendation is adopted. And I invite Tim now to move to recommendation 4.
Thank you. So recommendation 4, once again, is a constitutional amendment, and it relates to relations with other churches, reorganisation of canons. This recommendation is simply a reorganisation of how our existing canon law is published in the Constitution. It makes no changes to the law. There are currently 34 canons in Part 1 of Volume 2 of the Constitution, arranged chronologically by date of promulgation in a 75-page PDF. 16 of these canons related to the Church in Wales' relationship with other denominations and churches, with the other canons relating to a miscellany of other matters. This proposal would separate out these 16 ecumenical canons into a new section of the Constitution organised by theme instead of being organised chronologically. This will make the Constitution easier to use by putting all the law relating to our ecumenical relationships in one place and in a sensible order. This motion will not put into effect any change to the law of the Church in Wales. It is simply an editorial reorganisation of the existing laws to list them in a different order and format. The proposed new section 1.3 in Volume 2 of the Constitution is set out in its entirety in Appendix 2 of the report. Chair, I move recommendation 4.
Thank you very much. I think any of us who have looked at Volume 2 of the Constitution of the Church in Wales recognise that it's extremely difficult to navigate, particularly the canons which are represented not by subject but just in order of date. I'm very grateful for the work that the Head of Legal Services has undertaken to begin the process of rationalisation of that, and indeed he and I work together in sorting out the ecumenical canons and hopefully putting them in accessible manner. Could I invite all those in favour, please, to show? Thank you very much. Anyone who'd like to vote against? And any who'd like to register a abstention? Thank you very much. Recommendation 4 is adopted nemine contradicente. And so we move to recommendation 5.
Thank you, Chair. So recommendation 5 is approval of the report. The final matter in this item is to debate and approve the report in its entirety. Chair, I move that the report of the Standing Committee on Legal and Governance Matters be approved.
I formally second that the recommendation from the Chair and now invite anyone who wishes to speak to any part of the report on governance and legal matters. There being no indication that anyone wishes to speak, we'll now move to a vote. You're being very, very efficient. Is it that the siren call of the close of governing body is appealing more and more? I don't know, but let's have another vote. All those in favour of recommendation 5, please show. Thank you very much. Anyone who'd like to vote against, please show. Anyone who'd like to register an abstention, please show. And that recommendation is also carried nemine contradicente. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much, Governing Body. The Standing Committee does work extremely hard to carry the work of Governing Body forward, and I'd like to express my thanks to all members of Standing Committee, to the staff who support its work, and to Tim and Heather as our Chair and Vice Chair. If you look... If you look at our agenda, you'll notice that there are 3 items remaining on the agenda, and they are a President's charge, the farewells, and the date and place of the next meeting. The President's charge is something which is newly being introduced into the work of Governing Body, and that is because we felt that we'd like our Archbishop to speak to us at the end of a meeting and encourage us in the work of mission in the Church in Wales. It feels fitting that we finish Governing Body with that charge. And so I'd like to ask Governing Body's permission to take items 23, farewells, and items 24, the date and place of the next meeting, before I invite the President to offer his charge.
Is governing body content for me to reorder the agenda in that way? Thank you very much. I will still call upon the Archbishop to speak, but in this case, to speak to the farewells.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, Archbishop. To deal with the farewells, there are two people I wish to mention in particular, and the first is, of course, the Right Reverend Dr. Joanna Penberthy. Bishop Joanna retired as Bishop of St. David's on the 31st of July, and I want to thank her for all her contribution to the life of the Church in Wales, in particular her contribution on environmental matters and with our social responsibility network. Bishop Joanna was the first woman to be elected in November 2016 and then consecrated in January 2017 in the Church in Wales. She served as Bishop of St. David's, following service as the Board of Mission Officer prior to ordination, and then periods in the Diocese of Durham, Llandaff, St. Asaph, Bath and Wells and Swansea and Brecon, as well as her time as a priest in St. David's Diocese. I'm sure that all the members of the governing body will join me in wishing Joanna, Adrian and their family well for a very happy retirement. The Electoral College to elect Bishop Joanna's successor as the Bishop of St. David's will begin, as GB knows, on Monday, the 16th of October at St. David's Cathedral. I also wish to draw attention to Archdeacon Mike Comer, who will have retired by the time the governing body next meets in April next year. Mike has served the whole of his ministry in the Church in Wales within the Diocese of Llandaff, mostly in Bridgend and in the Vale of Glamorgan. He served his title in Mountain Ash with later Assistant Bishop of Llandaff, David Yeoman. He served in Llantwit Major, now the ministry area of Heritage Coast, in the early and late 90s, then moved to Iweni and St. Bride's Major between 2000 and 2005. In 2005, Mike became rector of Coety with Knowlton in Bridgend, adding Brackler and Coychurch, where he was also the area dean of Bridgend. And more recently, he's been the Archdeacon of Margam since 2018. Mike has been a member of the governing body for some years and has also served on the RB and as an Episcopal elector. We saw the depth of wisdom and thought when he preached to us earlier in our gathering, and I know that the governing body will not only wish him but also Anne well for their future, and now to thank him very obviously in the time-honoured way for his service in our midst.
So item 24 of the agenda is to note the date and place of our next meeting, and that we have decided as governing body that our next ordinary meeting is to be held on Wednesday the 17th and Thursday the 18th of April 2024, once more probably back in this very room. Before I hand over to the Archbishop for his charge, I'd like to express the thanks of all of us on behalf of governing body to all the staff, both those seen and unseen, including the technical staff who have helped to make this meeting run smoothly, and our translator for this meeting, Mr. Tudur Jones. I'm also asked to express thanks to all those who have undertaken particular jobs or duties, acting as chairs or arranging or contributing to our worship, and especially to the Reverend James Tout, Archbishop's chaplain, as worship coordinator, and to those who have preached to us, both Archdeacon Mike Comore and the
World President of the Mothers Union, Sharon Harper, who I think galvanized us all both to appreciate the work of the Mothers Union and the challenges that they offer to the church and to the world. A very warm thank you to all of those. Perhaps we could show our appreciation. One of the things that came out of the priorities session that we had together over the last 2 days was very much that governing body ought to make the work of this body accessible to the wider church. And not everyone seemed to know about the existence of Highlights, which is produced by our communication staff on after every meeting, and which offers a digest of our proceedings in a way which is designed to speak and communicate to the wider church. So please do bring Highlights to the attention of your diocesan conferences, to your mission or ministry areas, and to your churches. And Highlights should be available on the website within 2 weeks of our meeting. So look out for that, and perhaps we'll try and advertise the web address so that you can advertise and communicate the good news of our work together. Archbishop.
Chair, thank you very much. So we have gathered here as a governing body. We have been in role, and our task has been to be the Parliament of the Church in Wales. It seems to me that there's been something of the Jacob about our gathering. We have wrestled with one another and wrestled hard in order to wait for and get the blessing of God. It seems to me that the governing body does have a critical role in the life of the church. Firstly, there is the formal decision-making which shapes the bigger agenda for the life of our church, a decision-making exercise. There's the gathering informally, in which our bonds of friendship are renewed, in which news is exchanged. But there is also the shaping of culture and of opinion, the way in which we hear from one another and learn, and the way in which in that wrestling, that Jacobean experience, perhaps something of the voice of God is heard. At the end of the day, the role of our debate and our discussion should lead to some, I think, critical and prayerful discernment. We don't do that on our own behalf, we do that on behalf of others, the whole church. And I do hope that this hasn't seemed like an exercise which is done simply for its own sake, but to be alive to God, in the hearing, in the wrestling, in the working hard, to try and discern truly what it is that God is calling us to. And so in some of our engagement, we heard about the priorities working group and the way in which we are trying to establish and advance critical, principled expressions and articulations of life for our whole church. We heard about the exciting launch of a learning community, a new space in which that act of being attentive to one another allows us to learn further, and in the cascade of information that learning becomes something more substantive and indeed embedded in the life of our church. Supremely, we heard about the work of the Evangelism Committee and the sense of standing on the threshold of an extraordinary resource at our availability. But at the same time, the challenges that brings, both in terms of those small projects and those much larger enterprises. The fields are white, but are there the workers? We heard also in our gathering that people are at times fatigued, even exhausted. Don't we need again to engage in the prayerful act of asking God to provide us with all that we need and all that we long for, so that we may be able to do more than we hope for and imagine. It seems to me that part of our task of hearing the voice of God takes us not only into the very heart of what we think church life should be, but also an external listening. We do face a kind of crisis. The changes that are taking place all around us in relation to the environment are acute, and we only need to cast our minds back to the summer, seeing those soaring temperatures in Canada, what was happening in Hawaii, in southern Europe, people dying from heat exhaustion, while we died, it seemed, almost of drowning with the wind and the wet and the rain that we endured. There is a sense in which we need to let something of, when I say the world's agenda, I don't mean that in the Johannine sense, but I do mean that we need to let these big things sit within our own life and wrestle with them, because God's work is deeply incarnational. And if we are not listening and looking and seeing and engaging with some of these huge issues, then we're not doing our discernment and our prophetic work well. We need to engage with this world that God stepped into by his Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. And as the Word was made flesh, so the world is transformed by the crucified and risen one. And so our exercise is not simply a piece of psychological or sociological analysis. It is a missiological enterprise. These things are brought into the very heart of our debate so that they may be transformed in our praying and in our work. Earlier, someone referenced the last things of David, the things that you have seen and heard in me, these small things. Do them and do them well. So my charge to the governing body is to attend well to our formal business, to do our decision-making well in the rigours of debate and discussion with good listening ears. My charge to the governing body is not only to be a decision-making place, but to be a shaper of narratives and of agendas which we share together in communion, and to allow some kind of cascade both down and up in the life of our wider church, but also to be attentive to the life and times, to hear what God is doing in this God's world, and to let them be the very bread on which we feed in our debate, in our wrestling. If we are attentive to those things as well, then I think we can say humbly, but again, to reference that word used earlier, confidently, that we can stare our Saviour in the face and hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And I call upon Bishop Gregory to bless us.
Thank you very much, Your Grace. May I invite governing body please to stand. And so in closing this meeting of governing body, let us seek for God's blessing on our present and future life. May God the Father, who is the source of all life, strengthen us to walk in the ways into which he calls us. May God the Son
God's word of truth to the world, enable us to discern the truth. May God, the Holy Spirit, be the comforter and strength of our lives and enable us to find and to share eternal life. A bendith Dyw hollol liog, y tad y mab ar ysbryd lan, a fôn eich plith, ac y drigo gyda chwi, ond wastad.